What's poppin', high school? Hey, oh, hello. Oh, man. Well, good evening, good night. I'm so excited that y'all are here. My name is Dan. If we haven't gotten a chance to meet, I would love to get to meet you. Thank you. Hello, random citizen. Yeah, I'm so excited that y'all are here tonight. But before we go too far into things, I do have to say, if you're not signed up yet for Best Weekend Ever, you are going to want to make sure you are, because it's truly going to be the best weekend ever. So make sure you grab a flyer from your tribe leader. It's going to be dope. I can't even, you thought worship was great tonight. It's going to be 10 times better, all right? It's just going to be popping in there. So I don't want to give away anything, but that's my plug for BWE tonight. I'm excited for tonight. It's the best night of the week. Sunday night is always my favorite opportunity because I get to spend it with you. I could be doing other things, but honestly, nothing beats hanging out with some of the coolest high schoolers in the Valley. Yeah, you can give yourself a little shout out there. Yeah. But I want to start off tonight by doing a little social experiment, all right? We're going to get a little bit uncomfortable. We started off service today by doing a mixer. Oh, yes, we love getting uncomfortable. All right, but we're going to get a little uncomfortable. This is what I want you to do. If you have ever experienced stress, if you've ever experienced anxiety, if you've ever experienced feeling worried, if you've ever felt depressed, can you do me a favor and can you just stand up? If you've ever felt stressed, you've ever felt anxiety, you felt worried, maybe you felt depressed, can you stand up? All right. Go ahead, look to your left, look to your right, look in front of you if that applies. All right. Notice something. That's just about all of us in this room tonight. All right. You guys can go ahead and take a seat. You can take a seat. All right. That was also to just get some blood flowing into your head because you're about to sit here for a second. But the reason why we did that is because when it comes to feeling that way, it feels like, even though it sometimes feels like we're alone when it comes to things that stress us out, right? The reality is we're not. We're not alone. I mean, we all have things that trigger us. We all have things that set us off. We have things that make us feel anxious. We have things that make us feel worried. We have things that make us feel irritated. We have things that make us feel depressed. And you see, experiencing those things, they're uncomfortable. They're stressful. They can be full of anxiety. They can even be depressing. And unfortunately, that's just a part of life. You guys are high schoolers. You're teenagers. You understand this. You've lived anywhere from 14 to 18 years through life. And you've experienced some of these things. Things like family drama. Things like school stress and making sure you succeed in school. Maybe for the older people in the crowd, the upperclassmen, you're starting to get into the workforce and having to deal with work stress, extracurricular stress, right? Or, just because we are now in 2021 and we've made the jokes about 2020, but, a lot of the stuff from 2020 carried over into 2021, and we just kind of have the general, I'm a teenager living in one of the weirdest times in history. We have pandemics, we have social injustice, we have global warming kind of stress, right? And the reality is we are all feeling this a lot these days. Actually, a little bit ago, I feel like I heard this analogy that emotions are like phone calls. Anybody do phone calls anymore, or is it just snaps and texts? All right, phone calls, you remember that thing that your phone used to do before you had a text, right? It was like when you actually talk on the phone. I know, I don't like talking on the phone. It's like the weirdest thing ever. FaceTime me at least. I want to see your facial reaction, but just go with me for a second. Emotions are like phone calls on your cell, right? Sometimes they're expected, and then other times they're not expected. You see, we have the ability to answer them, right? And to connect with them. We can put them on FaceTime and put nothing but our sole focus on them. If you're braver than me, maybe you straight up just decline them, have them go to your voicemail and pretend like they don't exist, or maybe you just mute them and you turn it off and you hide your phone somewhere. That last one I can relate to a lot when it comes to emotions. You see, I feel like emotions, especially in my teenage years, I would see them kind of calling. And I would be like, bye, and I would toss my phone, I would shove it in my bag, I would make sure I wouldn't see it, sort of thing, because I wanted to ignore it. Maybe some of you, like me, you bury your emotions. When something happens that you don't like, well, what do? You try to escape to something else. I mean, think about it. When your parents are fighting, or you're having a relationship drama or friend drama, right? How do you typically deal with it? Do you go straight into it, or do you want to escape it? Do you hide your feelings because you think that showing emotion is going to make you some sort of like weakling? When you feel the pressure to get good grades, to succeed in school, to get into that good college that your parents want you to get into, or to handle just even your own insecurities in life, how do you process all of it? I mean, maybe you escape by binging the latest show on Netflix where you feel like you can be a part of a different story and a life that isn't your own. Maybe this is one that gets me in trouble all the time because then I'll stay up for hours, but you'll scroll for TikTok for hours. You think, oh, I'm only watching for 10 minutes, and it just ends up like from 7 to 10. You're like, oh my gosh, I just watched 3 hours worth of TikToks. And you do it until your mind is just kind of numb. Maybe for my gamers in the room, and I hope I get this terminology right, all right? Maybe you start up a game, right? You ditch your squads, and then you go for a hot drop, all right, just to get an adrenaline rush, all right? I hope, did I get that right? Yes. I don't game, all right? Just did that to connect with you, all right? I played Fortnite once during quarantine. It was the worst. I kept jumping out of the helicopter early. All right, don't even know what that means. All right. All right. Maybe though, you numb yourself by overeating so you don't have to feel your emotions, or maybe you don't eat at all because you feel like you can actually have control of something. Maybe, in all seriousness, you take part in something a little heavier. You take part in self-harm behaviors, or maybe hurting others, or maybe you have fits of anger and rage, or maybe you quiet the noise. You dole out the noise of emotions with things like porn, or relationships, or drinking, or drug usage, just so you don't have to feel what's going on underneath the surface, where you know everything is bottled up, just ready to explode. In a word, we're coping. And for a lot of us, that means trying to numb or escape the things that we don't want to feel. We look for ways to escape because we want relief. The problem is, though, is that sometimes what we do to relief ends up creating more stress. Why? Because ignoring doesn't make something disappear. Let me say that again. Ignoring something doesn't make it disappear. You know that already. You're high schoolers. You understand this. You've experienced that. And that's why tonight, I want to share with you something that I feel like actually might be helpful. I have found it to actually be very helpful for me in my life. And fair warning, it's going to sound like a pretty, like the worst possible idea, but I want you to hold on. I want you to stick with me because I think this can actually help us move forward. And not only that, but actually help us cope instead of feeling like we're getting stuck. Tonight, if you have a Bible, you can feel free to turn to it. If not, we're going to put it up on the screen here in just a second. But tonight, we're going to jump into a book in the Bible that I don't feel like we always jump towards. It's actually in the first half of the Bible, the Old Testament, and it's this book called Lamentations. All right, Lamentations. It sounds fun to say. All right, the key word in that title is the word lament. And if you don't know what lament means, you're like, that sounds like some Shakespearean thing I read in Hamlet or something. This is what lament means. Lament is a way to express deep grief, pain, or sorrow. So this whole book, this whole account here in the Old Testament is literally talking about a way to express deep grief, pain, or sorrow, which sounds super depressing that someone wrote an entire thing about this. I mean, this is not a word that we often use in the modern day 2021 language. No one throws that into the Instagram caption, like, I just lamented today, all right? But it's something that you actually might feel. You see, the person that wrote this book, historians, scholars, they believe it to be the prophet Jeremiah, who lived in Israel at the time. That's just one of the opinions of it, all right? But the author, the person who wrote this book, you see, they were dealing with a lot of sadness in their life at the time. They had personally witnessed the destruction of their city that they lived in, which was the city of Jerusalem, all right? It was being invaded by kind of the big people at the time, the Assyrians, the Babylonians. They were kind of taking control, all right? So it was a pretty horrible situation. It was pretty horrific. A lot of people died. And I can imagine the author of this account probably saw a lot of friends die, probably saw a lot of family members die. And those that did survive, well, they were ultimately starving. They were injured. They were homeless. Everything that they had known in their world had just crumbled around them. So with that little bit of context into this, I want us to take a look at what was written in the third chapter of Lamentations. After witnessing this dark moment in the history, this is what the author writes. He says, "The thought of my suffering and homelessness is bitter beyond words. I will never forget this awful time. As I grieve over my loss, yet I still dare to hope when I remember this. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning." I want to break this down real quick, all right? So first up in this passage, what we see is we experience a reality check, all right? The author, as he's writing this, he made a choice. He made a choice to be real. He made a choice to be authentic. He made a choice to be honest about what they were going through. A choice to deal with how they felt in this situation. They acknowledge that they're in pain. They acknowledge that there's sorrow. And they named what was difficult for them in the moment. I mean, they were using words in this. We could throw it back up there, but they used words like suffering. They used words like homelessness, bitterness. He said awful, grieving, loss. He's using words to describe how he's feeling. And I mean, all those words describe deep pain. They describe sadness. They describe isolation, and they describe feelings of despair that honestly, we as humans, even in 2021, we can relate to that idea. Now, even though what the author experienced was pretty terrible, I want you to understand this. The feelings that they felt aren't bad. If there's one thing you walk away with tonight, I want you to understand, don't miss this, all right? It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay. I want you to understand the importance of that phrase. We have songs about it. You've seen it on shirts. I mean, you've seen it on Instagram campaigns and everything like that. But I need you to understand the importance behind that. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel pain. It's okay to feel sadness. It's okay to feel isolation. It's okay to feel despair. No matter what somebody tells you, it's okay to feel those things. This is the thing, though. It's when we allow those feelings to start to control us, or we allow it to cause us to do unhealthy things, that's when it becomes the problem. When it dictates what we become, that's where we need to address it. Let's jump back to the second part of this passage. I loved it because this author, he had every right to be frustrated, to be mad, to be annoyed by what was going on, to curse God, honestly, for what was happening in our world, right? But something changed. Instead of saying, "Smite me, almighty smiter," something changed. You see, the author who wrote this kind of sad-laced poetry, he didn't stay stuck in sadness. Instead, the author made another choice. This time, it was a choice to do something to help deal with the feelings that they had, a choice to take action. The author moves from naming how they feel to naming what is true and what they knew was true about God. They made sure to tell themselves the truth in the middle of their difficult circumstances and their difficult feelings. The kind of truth that gives them the hope to be able to push forward. And I think sometimes we will do anything to not feel all of our feelings because it hurts. It's not pleasant. It's so easy to want to shove it into a bag, so we avoid them altogether. But what the author demonstrates here is a willingness to feel them, however bad they get, however difficult they get, however much they push us. But here's the thing, the trick is not to stay there, and that's important for us to understand too. In order to fully feel hope, we need to fully feel our emotions, however painful and difficult they might be. So how did the author find strength and courage to feel their difficult emotions? Well, he said it at the second half of the message in Lamentations 3:23. This is what he wrote after he described how he was feeling, how he named the difficulties. This is what the author wrote. He said, "The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning." I want us to read that again because I think we need to understand the importance behind this. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning. That should not happen. What he had seen, what the author had experienced in his life, that should not be what follows next. He should continue to be writing about his anger and his feelings that he has and the depression that he's finding himself in, the anxiety of what is going to happen next. But no. He says his mercies begin afresh each morning. The author in this moment is recognizing that there is a new start. He even gives it a timeline. He says every morning we get a fresh dose of hope, a fresh dose of love, and promises from God. That's how we cope. That's how we cope. We cope with fresh hope from God. God's love and faithfulness and compassion allow us to cope with every negative experience or feeling we have. We can't escape the pain without escaping the good stuff on the other side. His faithfulness doesn't change. It's new every morning. So when our pain is new, so is God's love. When our hurt is fresh, so is God's faithfulness. And because of God, and because of his compassion, and because of his love, and because of his consistency and carrying out his promises, we can handle whatever is causing us pain. One of the things I feel like I've learned in my 25 years here on the planet Earth, all right, is I don't know when this started. I don't know if this is a cultural thing, like it's happened within the past 50, 100 years, or if this is a human race thing. I don't know. But I feel like one of the things, especially in 2021, living in this Western culture, in America especially, we find ourselves turning to temporary fixes. For a better word, we use Band-Aids. I mean, like when we're a kid, we get a cut, we want a Band-Aid because we feel like that's going to fix it, right? That actually doesn't fix it. It might stop the blood from going somewhere, all right? But it doesn't fix the cut. But why do we do that then for the same exact things that we go through in our life? We approach it with Band-Aids to help us cope. Something goes wrong in our life, we put a Band-Aid on it. We try to temporarily fix it. We have a bad relationship, we try to put a Band-Aid on it. But they ultimately won't fix anything. And I don't understand. I mean, if we want to get through the tough moments of life, the difficult moments of life, the challenging moments of life, and not just get around them, we have to feel them. We have to feel our emotions, knowing that there is going to be hope on the other side. I want to tell about a moment in my life. For about a span of 4 to 5 years, basically from about my sophomore year of high school till about I was 21, I found myself doing this. I found myself turning to these temporary fixes, to utilizing kind of Band-Aids basically to cope with the difficulties that I found surrounding my life. I basically found myself using coping strategies that never got to the heart of my hurts. I found myself hiding everything into this bag behind this identity that I wanted people to perceive of me. I was the guy that did everything in high school. I was the guy that served here at the church. Everyone knew that sort of thing. And that's the identity that I wanted to go with. So I hid everything else that didn't fall in line with that identity behind it. Because of that, I found myself carrying around this emotional baggage. And within that baggage, I mean, it had a lot. It had crumbling, deteriorating relationships with my family, with my mom and my dad in particular, but even with my siblings. In that bag, it had the stresses of, finishing up high school, trying to figure out what's next, the stresses of post-high school. For my seniors in the room, you understand what the worry of that, what's next, and heading into adulthood. It doesn't ever feel like you're ready for it. I'm 25, I still don't understand adulthood. Within that bag, it was the high pressure to succeed, to go do the right things, to follow on this path that people had kind of determined for me. And not only that, but for me in particular, I don't want to let people down. I don't want to let myself down because that can be the worst possible thing. That was in the bag. Also in this bag was maintaining this filtered picture of my life. Only allowing people to see what I wanted them to see and not the real me. In that, I also wanted to do this on my own. I didn't really turn to people. I had friends, but I didn't really invite them into these difficulties I was experiencing because I didn't want to seek help. Because to me, in this mindset, seeking help meant having to be real with them, to be authentic. I did not want that. I didn't want them to get a glimpse of what was behind the curtain. And not only that, but I felt like I found myself at times utilizing substances to help avoid and numb the emotional aspect of it all. And as you can imagine, this story doesn't necessarily have the happiest of endings in a sense, because eventually, years of doing this and years of building into this and stuffing that bag, well, I eventually came to a crashing point. You see, it was the summer of me being 21, and I went to 3 summer camps that year over a span of 5 weeks. If you've ever been to one summer camp, you can only imagine what 3 over 5 weeks sounds like, especially as a leader. But the reason I went to this, I didn't have the best mindset for it. I wanted to escape because I saw things starting to crumble around me, things starting to fall apart. And so I wanted, what better way to escape it than to literally run away from it and not have to deal with it. And I thought, this will be great. After the 5-week period, I'll come back, everything will be good and normal. But that's not what happened. I came home after this kind of 5-week period, and everything continued to fall apart. I mean, at this point, I had about 4 to 5 years of me being physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually just tired, exhausted. I couldn't do it. I mean, I was starting to get to a point where I was losing sleep. I was a wreck. And then it eventually got to this one point where I got into one of the nastiest fights, arguments ever with my family. To the point where I said, I cannot do this anymore with you all. And I left. And thankfully, not knowing where I was going and kind of just the dumb 21 mindset, I eventually was able to kind of move in with this family that I knew, and they were willing to give me space, which was great. But it was difficult. It was so challenging. I didn't know what to do, and I remember there was a lot of sleepless nights, and this one night in particular, I couldn't sleep. It was like 1 or 2 in the morning. It was during the summer, and I was like, I can't lay here. I can't. I had to get up. Just my heart was racing and everything. So I went, I got my keys, I got in my car. It's like 1, 2 in the morning. I'm driving around. It's in Gilbert. I mean, there's nobody on the roads at that time, or at least should be. And I'm driving around. And I don't have a destination. Don't know where I'm going to go. And eventually I stopped. I ended up on the other side of Gilbert, and I ended up in this parking lot of this school. And I just got out of my car not knowing what I was going to do. I'm not going to say to school because I hope I don't get called out for trespassing, but I ended up on the football field. The gate was open. And I walked in, and I sat down. And I sat down in the stands, and I'm just looking out, and I feel like about 4 to 5 years just hit me in that moment. I started sobbing. I broke down. I was weeping. Tears, snot, all that's worse, the ugliest cry you can imagine. And I'm just there alone. And that's how I felt. Literally, I was alone, and also mentally, I felt alone in that moment. I couldn't do it anymore. Everyone had this perceived idea of who I was, but there I was, kind of the real me in this moment, just overcome by it all. I found myself lamenting. I had deep pain, grief, sorrow, everything going on. And eventually, as I'm sitting there thinking of this, I'm just thinking of, how did I get to this point? How did I get to this point that I'm literally sitting in these stands at 2 a.m? This is not how I envisioned it. And I had to be honest with myself. I had to start naming the difficulties in my life. I had to say how I felt. I could not go any further with refusing to act like it was not a big deal in my life. The biggest thing was I had to be honest with myself. I couldn't continue to live with this lie that I was carrying, this perceived notion of what I thought my life should be. And then once I was able to be honest with myself, then I felt like I had to be honest with my relationship with God, because it was not anywhere that I thought it should be. I ended up staying there for a few hours, just sitting there. I think my phone died at one point. No one knew I was there. It was the summer, and so the sun was starting to rise. It was about 5:30 in the morning. I remember just sitting in the stands looking at the sunrise. If you've ever seen an Arizona sunrise, they're gorgeous. I mean, we have gorgeous sunsets, but sunrises, they're just amazing. I'm just sitting there, dried tears on my face and everything. I'm just a mess. And as I sit there watching that sunrise, something started to click. I didn't get this divine moment, but something started to click that I continued to hold on to. I began to understand that in the midst of my circumstances, in the midst of my feelings, in the midst of my mental, emotional breakdown that I was having in this moment, that there was still hope. That a bad day, a bad moment, a bad couple of weeks, a bad couple of years does not define a bad life. It's been nearly 4 years since that moment. Now, I'll be honest, when I say that, I'm still working on trying to heal various aspects of some of those hurts. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. And I realize if I want to heal, that I need to feel instead of escaping my troops. Ultimately, I had to feel to be able to even begin to move forward. In just a moment, we're to close out service, and we're going to sing a song that we actually introduced last week. It's a great song. As we sing it, I want you to spend some time. I want you to be real with yourself. I want to send a challenge to you, an opportunity to you. I want you to take a few minutes. You don't even have to stand up to sing. If you need to sit, sit. If you need to find a corner of a room, find it. If you need to go talk to your tribe leader outside, do it. I want you to take a few minutes and think about how you avoid feeling. What are you using to turn off your feelings? Maybe is it something just simple, tangible, super easy to grab, right? Is it social media that you turn to? Is it video games that you turn to? Is it sleeping? Is it eating? Is it not eating? It isn't that these things in and of themselves are bad. It's that they're being used to do something that they weren't meant to do, that they weren't designed to do, to keep us from dealing with reality. And when we use these things in the wrong way, they'll never accomplish what we want them to. Or maybe it's something a little bit more serious, a little bit more complex. Maybe you find yourself engaging in self-harm. Maybe you find yourself engaging in drinking, find yourself engaging in smoking, pornography, or maybe some other thing that only you know about. I want you to understand this. If that is you, I'm so glad you're here tonight. You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to feel alone. I want to encourage you to invite someone into it. This is a judgment-free zone. We're here to create a safe place, and this is a safe place where you can talk about those things that you're going through because we care about you. Because in these cases, you aren't just numbing the pain, you're hurting yourself. And you need to know that the additional pain that you're creating doesn't erase the other pain. It does not make it go away. And I want you to understand, I get it. I really do. Sometimes big pain causes us to get stuck into coping behaviors that we didn't intend to be long-term. We thought they were to be short-term fixes, but then we become attached to it. And for those of you that maybe are sitting here tonight wondering Why would I tell anyone else my pain when I can't even honestly admit to myself what I'm going through? I get it. It took me time. It took me to that moment on that football field where I literally had to be honest with myself after 4 to 5 years of just shoving it into a bag. I get it. And for you, I want you to ask yourself this. What's getting in the way? What's getting in the way of you healing for real? What's getting in the way of me healing for real? I mean, for many of us, we're embarrassed. We're afraid of judgment. Some of us have believed this lie that having big pain or big emotions, it's a sign of weakness. That is the biggest lie that we have ever heard in the human race history. You should not believe that. Having emotions, having feelings makes you human. It does not make you weak. It makes you human. And opening up with yourself and inviting other people into it who are trustworthy will not only challenge the lies that hold you back, but can help you lead you to peace and to healing. Because I want you to understand this, high schoolers. You're about to enter into the world of adulthood where so many things are to challenge you and where situations can only find themselves to become even more difficult. But if we want to truly heal and we truly want to move forward, then you have to start by feeling the emotions in your life. Let's pray. Dear God, I probably regret saying this, but feelings suck at times. They're so challenging because feelings are good, but we don't want to feel pain. No one enjoys feeling pain. No one enjoys feeling the difficult moments, the circumstances that challenge us. We just want the good things in life. But ultimately, that we have to come to the realization that we are going to face difficult moments. Life is not just going to be unicorns and rainbows. There's going to be moments that push us to our edge. And when we get to those moments, we have to understand the importance of trusting you and realizing that you are going to provide us with peace, that you give us the opportunity. If it means we have to take it day by day, then let's take it day by day, because the beauty of it is that you are going to give us a new opportunity each and every day. Your love is new each day. Your hope is new each day. And your consistent promise, it starts anew each day. And that's what the beauty of that message is in that moment in history that we read tonight. And I hope that's something that we can apply into our lives here in 2021. I pray for these teenagers, these high schoolers. They're going for so much, so many different things that probably only they know about in their lives. And I pray that they're not afraid to be real about it, to be authentic about it, to be able to share in these things that they're dealing with. And the beauty is that they don't have to do it alone, that you are there with them. You just call us to run to you and to trust you and to just realize that you're going to help us. You might not take it away, but you're going to help us navigate through it, Lord. I thank you for your constant love, for your constant hope, and just for the message and the promises that you have been consistent with since day one. Thank you for all that you do and will continue to do in our lives.